This is a story of a good woman, a good wife, and a good mother who loved her family, including her mother-in-law, very, very much. The woman's name was April, her husband's name was Mark, her son's name was Anthony, and her mother-in-law's name was Margaret. April was a kind woman with a heart full of sunshine. Her husband, Mark, was a good man, but he had two loves in his life: his wife and his mother, Margaret. And little Anthony, their son, was the joy that held their small family together. But Mark's love for his mother was a deep, deep river, and soon it would overflow its banks, washing away the happiness in their home. He did not know that his mother, Margaret, was not the woman she pretended to be. Believe me when I say this, you absolutely cannot afford to walk away from this incredible, heart-wrenching tale that's about to unfold. This is one of those rare stories, packed with wisdom and insights that will echo in your mind long after it's over. So get comfortable, settle in, and maybe grab your favorite snack, because we're about to embark on a remarkable adventure together. And hey, if this is your first time here, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell so you never miss out, and if this story moves you even a little bit, show some love with a like. Let's dive into it. Their home was a small, neat house on a quiet street. It had a little garden in the front where April grew red and yellow flowers. Every morning, the sun would peek through the kitchen window and find April humming a soft tune, making breakfast for her family. She would make pancakes for Anthony, shaped like funny animals, and coffee for Mark, just the way he liked it. Her love was in the small things. It was in the clean, folded clothes, the warm dinners on the table, and the gentle way she would kiss Anthony's forehead before he went to school. Mark loved April. He would watch her as she moved around the house, and a smile would touch his lips. He knew he was a lucky man. But then, the phone would ring, and on the other end, it was always his mother, Margaret. Margaret lived just a few streets away, in the house Mark had grown up in. She was an older woman now, and she made sure Mark knew it. "Oh, Mark," she would say, her voice sounding weak and frail over the phone. "My back is hurting again. I cannot reach the jar of pickles on the top shelf." And Mark would say, "I'm on my way, Mama." He would leave his warm coffee. He would leave his conversation with April. He would go to his mother's house to get the jar of pickles. When he came back, April would be waiting with a patient smile, but her eyes would hold a little sadness. She never said anything. She did not want to be a complaining wife. This happened almost every day. One day, Margaret would call because her television remote was lost. Mark would go and find it under a cushion. The next day, she would call because she needed someone to read the newspaper to her, even though she had new glasses that worked perfectly fine. Another time, it was because a bird had made a nest on her porch, and she was worried. Mark saw these calls as his duty. "She is my mother, April," he would say. "She raised me all by herself. I have to take care of her." April understood this. She respected that he was a good son, but sometimes it felt like she and Anthony were second place. It felt like their little family of three was just a place Mark stayed in between visits to his mother. One afternoon, April was in the kitchen, baking a chocolate cake. It was a special day. It was her and Mark's wedding anniversary. She had planned a quiet, lovely evening. She had bought a new dress, a soft blue one that matched her eyes. Anthony was at a friend's house, so they could have the evening all to themselves. The whole house smelled of chocolate and love. She heard Mark's car pull into the driveway. She smoothed her dress, and her heart fluttered with excitement. He walked in, but he did not notice the cake. He did not notice her new dress. He had a worried look on his face. "What is it, honey?" April asked, her smile fading a little. "It's Mama," he said, running a hand through his hair. She called. She thinks she heard a strange noise in her attic. She is scared to be alone. I have to go over there. April's heart sank. It felt like a little stone dropping into a quiet pond. "But Mark," she said softly, "it's our anniversary. I baked a cake. I thought we could spend the evening together." Mark looked at the cake and then at her. For a moment, she saw a flicker of regret in his eyes, but then it was gone. It was replaced by that look of duty. "I know, sweetheart. I am so sorry. But Mama is scared. She is an old woman. You understand, don't you? I will be back as soon as I can." He gave her a quick kiss on the cheek and walked out the door. April stood alone in the quiet kitchen. The beautiful smell of chocolate cake suddenly felt heavy and sad. She looked at the 2 plates she had set on the small table, with the nice napkins and the single candle waiting to be lit. Slowly, she walked over and blew out the candle. She was a good wife. She understood. But understanding did not stop the tears from welling up in her eyes. Later that night, Mark came home. He found April asleep on the sofa, the television playing softly. The cake was on the counter, untouched. He felt a pang of guilt. He gently woke her up. "I'm sorry, April," he whispered. "It was nothing. Just an old house making noises. But you know how Mama gets." April just nodded. She was too tired and too sad to talk. She just wanted to go to bed and forget the day. As she lay in the dark, she wondered if Mark would ever see that she and Anthony needed him too. Not just for big emergencies, but for the small, happy moments, for the anniversaries, for the quiet evenings. She felt a deep worry in her heart. Mark was a good man, but he was blind. He was so busy being a good son that he was forgetting how to be a good husband. And April feared that one day his mother's calls would ask for something so big, so important, that it would break their little family apart. Little did she know, that day was coming very soon. It was coming on a day that should have been the happiest day of their son's year. A day Mark would have to make a choice. And his choice would plant a seed of regret so deep, it would take a miracle to pull it out. The seed of regret was planted on a day that should have been filled only with laughter and joy. It was Anthony's 7th birthday. For weeks, all he could talk about was his party. He wanted a superhero cake, blue and red balloons, and for all his little friends from school to come over and play in the backyard. Most of all, he wanted his dad to be there to watch him blow out his candles. April worked for days to make it perfect. She woke up before the sun on the morning of his birthday. The house was already filled with balloons. A big, colorful happy birthday banner was strung across the living room. On the kitchen table sat a pile of presents, wrapped in shiny paper. When Anthony came downstairs, his eyes grew wide with wonder. "Wow," he whispered, a huge smile spreading across his face. Mark was there, smiling too. He scooped Anthony up into a big hug. "Happy birthday, my big man," he said, his voice full of love. He gave Anthony his first gift, a shiny new bicycle. Anthony was so happy he could barely speak. He hugged his father's legs tightly. "Thank you, Daddy. Thank you." For a few hours, everything was perfect. They were a family. Mark helped Anthony put on his new helmet, and they took the bike for a ride down the sidewalk. April watched from the porch, her heart full of a warm, gentle happiness. She thought, maybe today will be different. Maybe today will just be for us. The party was set to start at 2 o'clock. As April was taking the superhero cake out of the oven, the phone rang. It was a familiar sound, a sound that made the happy feeling in April's chest tighten into a small, hard knot. She looked at Mark. He was playing a game with Anthony on the floor, but he heard it too. The laughter in his eyes faded. He knew who it was. Slowly, he got up and answered the phone. "Hello? Mama?" April watched his face. She saw his shoulders slump. She saw the worry creep into his expression, chasing away the birthday joy. He listened for a long time, saying only, "Yes, Mama? Okay, Mama. Don't worry, Mama." When he hung up, he turned to April. The look on his face told her everything before he even said a word. "I have to go," he said quietly. April felt a surge of frustration, something she rarely allowed herself to feel. "Mark, no," she said, her voice firmer than usual. "Not today. It's Anthony's birthday. His friends will be here in an hour. You promised him you would be here." "I know, April, I know," he said, and he looked truly torn. "But it's Mama. She says she feels dizzy. She says her heart is beating funny. She's scared, April. What if something is really wrong?" "Her heart was beating funny last month, too," April said, her voice dropping to a whisper so Anthony wouldn't hear, "and it was just because she drank too much coffee." "Mark, she does this every time there is something important for us. Can't you see that?" "You don't know that," he said, his voice rising a little. "What if this is the one time it's real? What if I don't go, and something happens to her? I could never forgive myself. You can handle the party. You're great with the kids." "It's not about handling the party," April pleaded. "It's about his father being here. For him. Look at him, Mark." They both looked at Anthony, who had stopped playing and was now watching them with big, worried eyes. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling in the room had turned from sunny to gray. Mark knelt down in front of his son. "Hey, buddy," he said, forcing a smile. "Daddy has to go help Grandma. She's not feeling very well. But I will be back before you cut your cake. I promise. Okay?" Anthony's little lip trembled. "You'll miss the games," he said softly. "I'll be back," Mark repeated, giving him a quick hug. He stood up, looked at April with pleading eyes, and said, "I'll be fast. I promise." Then he was gone. The front door clicked shut, and a heavy silence fell over the house, a silence that even the colorful balloons could not cheer up. Soon the doorbell started ringing. Anthony's friends arrived, full of energy and excitement. The house filled with the sounds of happy children running and shouting. April put on a brave smile. She organized games, served juice and snacks, and tried her best to make sure Anthony was having a good time. But every few minutes, Anthony would run to the front window and look out at the empty driveway. "Is Daddy here yet?" he would ask. And every time, April would have to say, "Not yet, sweetie, but he's trying to get here soon." 2 hours passed. The sun began to dip lower in the sky. It was time to cut the cake. All the children gathered around the table. April placed the big superhero cake in the middle and lit the 7 candles. The flames danced, reflecting in Anthony's hopeful eyes as he looked one last time toward the door. It did not open. "Go on, honey, make a wish," April urged gently, her heart aching for him. Anthony closed his eyes tightly. He took a deep breath and blew. All 7 candles went out. The children cheered. But as April cut the first slice of cake, she saw a single tear roll down her son's cheek. He wiped it away quickly, hoping no one saw, but she saw. Just then, her phone rang. It was Mark. "April," he said, his voice rushed. "I am so sorry. I can't make it back. I'm at the hospital with Mama. The doctors want to run some tests to be safe. They think it's best she stays overnight for observation." April closed her eyes. She knew what this meant. It meant Margaret had gotten exactly what she wanted. She had Mark, all to herself, on a day that belonged to her grandson. "Is she okay?" April asked, her voice flat and tired. "The doctor said her heart rate is a little high, but she's stable. They're not too worried," Mark said. "But you know, Mama, she is putting on a brave face. I need to be here for her. Please, tell Anthony I am so sorry. I will make it up to him. I promise." Another promise. April looked at her son, who was picking at his cake, his birthday wish already forgotten. She felt a cold, hard certainty settle in her heart. Mark had made his choice. He had chosen his mother's manufactured drama over his son's real, once-in-a-year happiness. She hung up the phone without saying goodbye. She had to be strong for Anthony. But as she served cake to the other children, she knew something inside her had broken. This was not about pickles on a high shelf anymore. This was about her son's heart. And she realized that if Mark could not see the damage he was causing, then she would have to find a way to protect her son and herself from being broken again and again. The days that followed Anthony's birthday were heavy, with a quiet that felt louder than shouting. The superhero banner was taken down, the balloons were gone, and the leftover cake sat in the refrigerator, a sad reminder of a promise Mark had broken. Mark came home from the hospital the next day, full of apologies and explanations. Margaret was fine, he said. The doctors had sent her home, telling her to rest and avoid stress. He expected April to nod and understand, the way she always did. But this time, something was different. April did not look at him when he walked into the kitchen. She was standing at the sink, her hands busy washing a plate that was already clean. "April, I am so sorry about yesterday," he began, his voice soft. "Mama was so scared. I had to be there." She turned off the water and placed the plate carefully in the drying rack. She turned to face him, and her eyes were not angry. They were empty. It was an emptiness that scared Mark more than anger ever could. "She won every moment of his birthday, Mark," April said, her voice low and steady. "She won the morning because you were worried about her future calls. She won the party because you left. And she won the night because you were at her side." What was left for Anthony? A slice of cake and a tear he tried to hide. Mark felt a sting of defensiveness. "That's not fair, April. My mother was sick." "Was she?" April asked, and the simple question hung in the air between them. "Or was she just lonely on a day when she knew your attention would be somewhere else? Did the doctors find anything, Mark? Anything at all?" He looked away. "They said it was a panic attack, but that's still serious." "Yes," April said, her voice hollow. "It is. And so is a little boy's heart, a heart that waited and waited for his father to come home." She walked past him then, leaving him alone in the kitchen. For the first time, Mark felt a true chill of fear. It wasn't about his mother's health. It was about his own home, which suddenly felt like it was built on cracking ice. A few weeks went by. Things seemed to return to normal, but it was a fragile normal. The warmth was gone. April still made dinner, she still helped Anthony with his homework, and she was still kind. But she had pulled a part of herself away from Mark, keeping it safe where his choices could no longer hurt it. Then came the notice from Anthony's school. There was going to be a Dad and Donuts Day, a special morning breakfast where fathers were invited to come and have donuts with their children in the classroom. Anthony's face lit up when he showed Mark the paper. It was a chance for a new promise, a chance to fix the one that had been broken. "Can you come, Daddy?" he asked, his voice small and full of hope. "It's just for 1 hour. We get to show you our drawings." Mark looked at his son's hopeful face, and his heart ached with love and guilt. He knelt down and looked him in the eyes. "Of course, I'll be there, buddy," he said, and he meant it. "I would not miss it for the world, I promise." April heard the promise, and a sad, knowing look crossed her face. She said nothing. She just went about her day. The morning of the Dad and Donuts Day arrived. Mark got up early. He put on a nice shirt. He was excited. He was going to be the dad Anthony deserved. As he was getting his keys, ready to walk out the door with a beaming Anthony, the phone rang. A terrible, familiar feeling washed over the room. Anthony froze, his Donut Day excitement vanishing like a puff of smoke. Mark stared at the phone as if it were a snake. April, who was packing Anthony's backpack, stopped and closed her eyes. Slowly, Mark answered it. "Hello?" It was Margaret. Her voice was not weak this time. It was frantic, panicked. Mark, thank goodness. I fell. I was getting out of the shower and my legs just gave out. I'm on the floor in the bathroom. I can't get up. My hip. Oh, Mark, I think my hip is broken." Mark's face went pale. "Did you call for an ambulance, Mama?" No, I don't want strangers here. I need you. Please, son, please hurry," she cried, and her cry sounded so real, so full of pain. Mark hung up the phone, his mind racing. He looked at Anthony, whose face was a mask of disbelief and hurt. He looked at April, who was watching him with a cold, piercing calm. "April," he started, his voice shaking. "She fell. She thinks she broke her hip. I have to." "I know," April said, her voice cutting through his panic like a shard of glass. "You have to go." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a final judgment. "But Anthony," Mark stammered, looking at his son. "I will take Anthony to school," April said. She knelt and zipped up her son's backpack. She did not look at Mark. She looked only at her child. "Come on, sweetie. Let's go get a donut." Anthony looked at his father one last time, his eyes swimming with a fresh wave of tears. He didn't say a word. He just took his mother's hand and walked out the door. Mark stood there, frozen. Duty called. He grabbed his keys and rushed out of the house, his heart pounding with worry for his mother. He drove faster than he should, picturing her lying helpless on the cold floor. He used his key to get into her house, calling her name. "Mama, I'm here. Where are you?" He ran to the bathroom. The door was open. The floor was dry. There was no one there. Confused, he turned around, and he saw her. Margaret was sitting at her kitchen table, wearing her favorite robe. She was stirring a cup of tea. She looked up at him, and there was no pain on her face. There was only a small, triumphant smile. "Oh, Mark," she said, her voice perfectly calm. "You came so quickly, I knew you would." Mark stared at her, his mind struggling to understand. You said you fell. You said you broke your hip." Margaret took a slow sip of her tea. "My hip felt a little sore," she said lightly, "and I got so worried. But once I sat down with a cup of tea, it felt much better. It's a good thing I have a son who loves me enough to come right away when I call." The world seemed to stop. The sound of her words, the look on her face, the quiet kitchen, it all crashed down on Mark at once. The lie was so clear, so bold. He saw it all. The dizzy spells, the lost remote, the heart palpitations, the fall. It was all a game to keep him tied to her, a game she played every time she felt him slipping away into his own life. He thought of Anthony's face at the door. He thought of the empty promise of donuts and drawings. He had chosen this lie over his son's truth. A sickening wave of regret, so powerful it almost buckled his knees, washed over him. He didn't say a word to her. He just turned around and walked out of her house, the sound of her calm, victorious voice following him. He drove home, a desperate need to fix it, to beg for forgiveness, burning in his chest. But when he opened the door to his own house, it was silent. Too silent. "April," he called out. "Anthony?" There was no answer. He walked into the kitchen. On the table, where Anthony's breakfast should have been, sat a single piece of paper. It was a note, written in April's neat, clear handwriting. It did not say much. It did not need to. It said, "I have gone to teach our son what a family who chooses him looks like. Don't look for us." The silence in the house was a living thing. It was heavy and thick, pressing in on Mark from all sides. He stood in the middle of the kitchen, holding the single piece of paper April had left. The words were few, but they were heavier than 1,000 angry shouts. "I have gone to teach our son what a family who chooses him looks like. Don't look for us." He read the words again and again, but they did not change. They were a closed door, a final, quiet goodbye. His legs felt weak, and he sank into a chair at the kitchen table. He looked around the room. It was the same room where April had hummed her soft tunes. The same room where Anthony had laughed with joy on his birthday morning. But now, it was just a room. A collection of things, without life, without love. The heart of the house was gone. He slowly got up and walked through the silent rooms. He went into Anthony's bedroom. The superhero bedding was neatly made. A small toy car was on the floor next to his bed. Mark picked it up. Its small wheels spun freely in his large, trembling hand. This tiny toy held the weight of the entire world. He had missed Dad and Donuts Day for a lie. He had traded his son's smile for his mother's fake tears. A wave of shame so deep it burned washed over him. He was not a bad man, he had always told himself. He was a good son. But looking at the empty room, he knew the truth. A good son who was a bad husband and a failed father was not a good man at all. He went into his and April's bedroom. A faint scent of her perfume, something light and flowery like her smile, lingered in the air. Her side of the bed was perfectly made. On her nightstand was a book she was reading and a picture frame. He picked it up. It was a photo from a few years ago, a day at the park. He was holding a much younger Anthony on his shoulders, and April was standing beside them, her head tilted back in laughter, her face full of pure, uncomplicated joy. Looking at that photo, a fire ignited inside his chest. It was a fire of anger, but it was not directed at April. It was for his mother, for her selfishness, for the games she had played that had cost him everything. He put the photo down, his hands no longer trembling. They were steady with a cold, hard purpose. He walked out of the house, got back in his car, and drove back to Margaret Street. He did not speed this time. He drove with a calm, terrifying focus. He walked into her house without knocking. She was still at the kitchen table, finishing her tea. She looked up at him, a flicker of irritation on her face. "Mark, you're back already? Did you forget something?" He stood in her doorway, and for the first time in his life, he did not look like her dutiful son. He looked like a stranger. "She's gone, Mama," he said, his voice flat and dead. "April is gone. She took Anthony with her." Margaret's face changed. She put her teacup down. She tried to arrange her features into a look of sympathy. "Oh, my dear boy, that woman, always so dramatic. She will be back in a day or two, once she has calmed down." "No," Mark said, and the word cut through her casual dismissal. "She is not coming back. And you know why? Because today was Dad and Donuts Day at Anthony's school. He asked me to go. I promised him I would be there." He took a step into the room. "I was getting my keys. I was walking out the door with my son. And then you called. You told me you fell. You told me you broke your hip. You cried." Margaret shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Well, I was worried, Mark. An old woman gets scared." "Stop," he said. His voice was not loud, but it had a power she had never heard from him before. "Stop lying. There was no fall. There was no broken hip. There was only you, sitting here with your cup of tea, making sure I would come running, making sure my son's special day was about you instead." Tears welled in Margaret's eyes. This was a familiar tactic. The tears always worked. "How can you speak to me this way? I am your mother. I have been in pain." "The only pain in this family, Mama," Mark said, his voice breaking with the truth of it, "is the pain you cause. You have been pulling my strings for years. Every holiday, every anniversary, every special moment, you find a way to make it about you. I let you do it. That is my fault. I was so busy trying to be a good son that I let you destroy my family. But that is over now." He looked at the woman who had raised him, and he did not see his loving mother. He saw a lonely, selfish person who was so afraid of being second place that she would burn down her own son's happiness just to feel the warmth of the fire. "April has left me," he said, the words tearing his heart as he spoke them. "My son thinks his father's promises mean nothing. This is what your games have cost me. So I want you to know, the phone calls are over. The emergencies are over. I have lost my family because I chose you over them again and again. I will not make that choice again. He turned to leave. "Mark, wait!" she cried. The tears now real, tears of fear, not of pain. "Don't say that, you're all I have!" He stopped at the door, but did not turn around. "And you, Mama, are the reason I have nothing." He walked out and closed the door behind him, leaving her alone in her own suffocating silence. He spent the rest of the day in a desperate haze. He called April's phone. It went straight to voicemail. He called her sister, Sarah. She answered. "Sarah, it's Mark. Do you know where April is? Is she with you?" he asked, his voice pleading. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Mark," Sarah said, her voice cold and protective. "I know where she is, and she is safe. That's all you need to know. She needs time. Anthony needs time. Leave them be." "But I need to talk to her. I need to explain," he begged. "Explain what?" Sarah shot back. "That you finally figured out what she has known for years? That's not for her, Mark. That's for you. Give her peace. If you love her at all, give her the peace you never could when you were with her." And then she hung up. The click of the phone was like a final nail in a coffin. He was truly alone. That night, Mark sat in the dark, silent living room. The anger was gone. The desperation was gone. All that was left was a vast, empty ocean of regret. He finally understood. Chasing after April would not fix this. Apologizing would not fix this. Words were meaningless now. They were the cheap coins he had used to pay for his freedom from his family's needs. He had to do more than say he was sorry. He had to become a man who was worthy of their return. He didn't know how. He didn't know if it was even possible. But as he sat there in the darkness, looking at the empty space where his family's laughter used to be, he made a new promise. Not to April, not to Anthony, not to anyone else. It was a quiet promise to himself. He would change. He would break the chains his mother had wrapped around him. He would become the man his son deserved, even if his son was not there to see it. It was the only thing he had left to do. Weeks bled into a month, then 2. The silence in Mark's house did not get easier. It simply changed. It was no longer a fresh wound, but a dull, constant ache in his bones. He learned to live with it. He went to work. He paid the bills. He mowed the lawn. He existed in the spaces that April and Anthony used to fill with life. But inside, a quiet, difficult construction was underway. He was trying to rebuild the man he was supposed to be. He started seeing a counselor, a kind, older man named Dr. Evans. In a small, calm office that smelled of old books, Mark finally spoke the words he had never dared to think. "I thought being a good son was the most important thing," Mark said one afternoon, staring at his hands. "I thought if I took care of my mother, it made me a good man. But I was just a boy, running when she called. A husband is supposed to be a rock for his own family. I was just sand. I washed away whenever her tide came in." Dr. Evans listened patiently. "And what does a rock do, Mark?" Mark thought for a long moment. "It stays," he said, the word heavy with all the times he had left. "It stays. It protects. It's the foundation they can build on." This was the work he did, week after week. He was learning to be a rock. The first test of this new foundation came on a Tuesday evening. He was sitting in the quiet living room, reading a book, when his phone lit up. The name on the screen was Mama. His heart began to pound, a frantic, familiar rhythm. The old Mark would have answered on the first ring. The old Mark would have been filled with a mix of dread and duty. But the new Mark, the one being built piece by painful piece, just looked at the screen. He watched it ring, and ring, and ring, until it finally went silent. It was one of the hardest things he had ever done. An hour later, she called again. He let it go to voicemail. The message she left was full of panicked tears. "Mark, I can't find my heart pills. The pharmacy said they delivered them, but they're not here. I'm feeling faint. Please, son, please call me back." He almost broke. His hand reached for the phone. But then he remembered the lie about the broken hip. He remembered Anthony's face at the door. He took a deep breath, his heart aching. He called the pharmacy. A kind woman confirmed that his mother's prescription had been delivered and signed for by Margaret herself that morning. He hung up, a cold, sad certainty settling over him. He did not call his mother back. 2 days later, there was a knock on his front door. He opened it to find Margaret standing on his porch. She looked frail and smaller than he remembered. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "You didn't call," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I could have died, Mark." He did not invite her in. He stood in the doorway, a human wall. "I called the pharmacy, Mama. You had your pills. It was another game." Her face crumpled. "It wasn't a game. I was scared. And you abandoned me. That woman, that April, she has poisoned you against your own mother." "No," Mark said, his voice quiet but firm. "April didn't do this. You did. And I did. I let it happen. I love you, Mama, but I cannot be your husband. I cannot be your emergency contact. I cannot be the center of your world anymore. I have to build my own." "But I am your world," she cried, reaching for his arm. "I raised you. I sacrificed for you." He gently but firmly removed her hand. "And I am grateful. I will always be your son. I will make sure you are safe. I will set up a service to check on you. But the panicked phone calls have to stop. I am trying to fix what we broke. And I can't do that if I am still running back to you every time you feel lonely." He saw a flicker of something new in her eyes, not just anger, but real fear, the fear of being truly alone. But Mark knew he could not save her from that fear. He had to save his own family first. "I have to go, Mama," he said softly. He closed the door, his heart feeling like 1,000-pound weight. But for the first time, it was a weight he knew he could carry. Miles away, in a small, sunny house with a big backyard, April was watching Anthony draw. He was drawing a picture of a superhero. It looked a lot like his father. They were staying with her sister, Sarah, and the days were peaceful. The quiet here was different from the quiet at Mark's house. It was a healing quiet, filled with the soft sounds of normal life. "Do you think Daddy will ever come see me?" Anthony asked, not looking up from his drawing. April's heart squeezed. She sat down next to him. "I don't know, sweetie. Daddy is working on some very important things right now." "Like at his job?" "Sort of," April said, stroking his hair. "It's more like he's working on his heart." Later that evening, after Anthony was asleep, April was talking with Sarah in the kitchen. "I miss him," April confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "I miss the man I married, not the man he became." "I know," Sarah said, putting a comforting hand on her shoulder. "But you are doing the right thing, for you and for Anthony. You have to let him fix himself, or you will all drown together." Back at his empty house, Mark knew Sarah was right. He couldn't just wait. He had to act. An apology wasn't enough. He had to provide the one thing he had always failed to give: real, dependable security. The next day, he went to see a lawyer. "I want to sign the house over to my wife," Mark said, "and I want to set up a trust fund for my son's education that I can't touch. I want it all put in her name." The lawyer raised his eyebrows. "Are you getting a divorce, Mr. Jackson?" "I don't know," Mark said honestly. "But I know that my wife and my son deserve a foundation, a rock, even if I'm not there to be it for them right now. This is the only way I know how to show them that I am serious. That this time, it's not just another empty promise." He spent the next week arranging the paperwork. When it was all done, he placed the legal documents into a large envelope. Inside, he also placed a single, handwritten letter. It was short. He had written it 100 times in his head. He drove to the post office, the heavy envelope feeling like the most important thing he had ever held. He did not send it to his old address. He sent it to Sarah's house. He knew April would be there. As he dropped the envelope into the blue mailbox, he felt no sense of victory, only a quiet, terrifying hope. He had done the work. He had set his boundary. He had made a true, selfless sacrifice. He had sent his message in a bottle across a vast, lonely ocean. Now, all he could do was wait and see if it would ever reach the shore. The large envelope arrived on a sunny Thursday afternoon. April saw the return address, saw Mark's familiar handwriting, and her heart did a painful flip in her chest. For a moment, she was afraid to open it. She thought it would be a letter full of excuses, another promise she couldn't bring herself to believe. She took it into the kitchen and sat at the table, her hands trembling just a little. She opened it carefully. Inside, there was not just a letter, but a thick stack of official-looking documents. She pulled out the letter first. It was short, just a few lines. "April," it began. "Words are not enough. I know that now. These are not words. This is a foundation, a rock for you and Anthony, whether I am part of your lives or not. It's yours, completely. I am working on my heart, just like you told Anthony. I hope, one day, you will be able to see that. I will not call. I will not bother you. I will just be here, working. I love you both more than I ever knew how to show. Mark." Confused, she turned to the legal papers. Her eyes scanned the dense text, picking out phrases. "Deed of transfer. Irrevocable trust. Sole beneficiary. April Jackson. Sole beneficiary. Anthony Jackson." It took her a moment to understand. He had given her the house, not in a divorce settlement, but freely. He had set up a fund for their son's future. He had built a fortress of security for them and had left himself outside the walls. This wasn't a promise. This was proof. It was the action of a man who was putting his family first, even at his own expense. Tears streamed down her face, but they were not tears of sadness or anger. They were tears of shock, of a fragile, hesitant hope. She sat there for a long time, holding the papers, the letter pressed to her heart. A few days later, April was in the garden with Anthony. He was chasing butterflies while she tended to Sarah's rose bushes. Her mind kept drifting back to the letter, to the man who wrote it. Had he really changed? Was it possible? "Mommy," Anthony said, running up to her. "When can we go home?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "We are home. Here, with Aunt Sarah." "No," he said, shaking his head. "I mean our home. With my superhero room. I miss my bed." April looked at her son. He missed his home. Not just the building, but the idea of it. The idea of his family. Whole. She realized that by protecting him from Mark's broken promises, she had also taken him away from his father. She had been teaching him what a family who chose him looked like. But maybe a part of that lesson was learning how to forgive. Maybe it was about seeing a man try to rebuild himself after he had fallen. That evening, she made a decision. It was a risk. It could lead to more heartbreak. But looking at the papers on her nightstand and thinking of her son's sad eyes, she knew it was a risk she had to take. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. Mark was in the small apartment he had rented, eating a simple dinner alone, when his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. He almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. "Hello." "Hi, Mark," a soft voice said. "It's me." His heart stopped. He forgot how to breathe. "April," he whispered, his voice hoarse. There was a long silence. He could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. He waited. He did not beg. He did not plead. He just waited for her to speak. "I got the papers," she said finally. "Thank you. That was more than I ever expected." "You deserve it," he said simply. You both do. Mark, she said, and he could hear the emotion in her voice. Anthony misses his bed. He closed his eyes. He understood what she was saying. It wasn't just about the bed. It was about home. I miss him too, he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. I miss you both so much. It hurts to breathe sometimes. Maybe, April said slowly, her voice full of a cautious hope, you could come see his bed this weekend. And maybe you could have dinner with us. We can just talk. Joy, so pure and overwhelming it was painful, flooded through him. It was not a promise of forever. It was not a magical fix. It was a beginning. A chance. Yes, he said, his voice cracking. Yes, April. I would love that. I would love nothing more in the world. That Saturday, Mark drove to the house. His house. Their house. He walked up to the front door, his heart pounding not with fear or duty, but with a nervous, hopeful love. He knocked. The door opened, and April stood there. She looked beautiful. She gave him a small, shy smile. Hi, she said. Hi, he said back. Then a small figure came running from behind her. Daddy, Anthony shouted, and he launched himself into Mark's arms. Mark knelt and hugged his son, burying his face in his boy's hair, breathing in the scent of home. He held him tight, the solid, real weight of him a miracle in his arms. This was his foundation. This was his rock. He looked up at April over Anthony's shoulder. Her eyes were shining with tears, but she was smiling. A real, genuine smile. The one he had been so afraid he would never see again. He knew it would not be easy. Trust would have to be rebuilt one day at a time. The scars would remain. His mother would always be a complex part of their story. But as he stood there on the porch of the home he had given away, holding his son and looking at his wife, he knew he had finally chosen correctly. He had lost everything to learn what was truly important. And now, piece by piece, with love and patience and promises he would never break again, he was finally ready to build it all back. He had made a terrible mistake, but in the end, it was the woman he had wronged, his wife, who had shown him the way back, and she had made him regret everything, only to give him a chance to get it all right. Dear viewers, what a journey of the heart we have just witnessed. This story teaches us a very powerful lesson about choices. Sometimes the lines of love and duty can become blurred, especially when it comes to family. Mark thought he was being a good son, but he forgot that when you build your own family, your first promise must be to the home you have created with your wife and children. He had to lose everything to finally see what truly mattered. It wasn't about big, loud fights. It was about the quiet moments he missed, the empty promises, and the little tears his son tried to hide. But this is also a story of hope. It shows that it is never too late to change. Mark didn't just say sorry. He proved it with his actions. He built a new foundation, a rock for his family to stand on, and he earned his way back into their hearts. And let us not forget the quiet strength of April, who knew that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to step away, to give someone the space they need to truly find themselves. We would love to read your thoughts in the comments below. What part of this story touched you the most? If this story warmed your heart and gave you something to think about, please give this video a thumbs up by hitting the like button. Share it with someone who might need to hear this message. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you never miss another story. And don't forget,
at Virtuous Stories, we love you.